Prime Minister Rishi Sunak must call a general election in the next year. The last date it could feasibly be held is January 2025, but Sunak has hinted it'll be sooner than that. So let's take a look at when the next general election could be held. The previous UK general election was held in December 2019 and saw Boris Johnson's Conservative Party win a landslide majority and break the Brexit impasse. Now, a lot has happened between now and then. The UK has left the EU, a pandemic ravaged the country, war has broken out in Europe and the Middle East, and Johnson is no longer Prime Minister. In fact, the leaders of seven largest parties in Great Britain at the time of the last election have all subsequently been replaced. One of the lesser-known acts of the Johnson government was the abolition of the Fixed Term Parliament Act, which was introduced by the coalition government back in 2011. The act required for elections to be held every 5 years on the first Thursday of May, and made it harder for the Prime Minister to call a snap election. There were two ways that the act could be circumvented, either through a vote of no confidence in the government, which required just a simple majority, or a 2/3 majority of members voting in favour of an election. The latter condition was met in both 2017 and 2019, when Theresa May and Boris Johnson respectively called for snap votes. The law was eventually repealed in 2022, and the power was restored to the Prime Minister to advise the monarch on when to call an election. The maximum length of a parliamentary term is 5 years, and so the latest that Parliament can be dissolved is the 17th of December 2024, with an election being held no later than the 28th of January 2025. Technically, the Prime Minister could wait until the last possible day to hold an election, yet this is seen as unlikely since the campaigning period would encompass the Christmas holidays, likely infuriating not only MPs, current and future, but also voters. Late in 2023, Sunak stated that the election would be in 2024 and not 2025. And earlier this year, he indicated that we would wait until the second half of the year, thus ruling out a general election coinciding with local elections in England on the 2nd of May. This again holds risk for Sunak, since a poor set of local elections could see a last-ditch attempt to oust him by rebellious Tory MPs. Given the state of current polling, with Labour leading the Conservatives by upwards of 20 points, it makes sense to delay the election for as long as possible. Holding it in the second half of 2024 may allow for economic conditions to improve, especially should inflation continue to fall, whilst further tax cuts are mooted in the upcoming budget. An election over the summer is unlikely. In the month of July, August and September, only once has a general election been held, and that was in July 1945, merely weeks after the end of the war in Europe. Other than May and June, the most popular month for election has been October, although the last poll to be held then was 50 years ago. It's been hinted that November is unlikely, since it would coincide with the US election, which could distract attention away from the UK vote. Now there's even talk of a December election, potentially allowing for a further fiscal event in the autumn as a last-ditch attempt to save Conservative fortunes. Nevertheless, it would seem as though October currently looks like the most likely time for Sunak to call an election, allowing time for the economy to recover, avoiding the potential chaos of the US elections, and not forcing voters out to polling stations at the height of summer or winter may be the smartest bet. Yet, with the Conservative numbers showing little sign of shifting and by-election losses mounting, holding the election later in the year may only be delaying the reckoning for Sunak and the Conservatives.